Hi, morning. Welcome to ASEAN Kita with me, Farhan Hakimi, and my co-host Amirul Aiman. And today we will be talking about bringing ASEAN closer to its people. Because when we talk about ASEAN, we often think of policies, trade agreements, and those typical formal leaders meetings. But for the everyday person, the street vendors in Jakarta, let's say, the university students in Bangkok, or the ride-hailing driver in Manila, does ASEAN truly feel like a part of their daily lives? Right now, the regional bloc is more influential than ever and shaping everything from our economy to our mobility. But are we feeling that connection? Do you feel that, Amrul?
Yeah, that's what we are trying to unravel today, Farhan, and joining us today to explore how we can bring ASEAN closer to its people is Mr. Amit Farid Rahim, a Director of Strategy from KRA Group. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Maybe the first question goes to ASEAN has made efforts to engage with the public through various initiatives, but how would you assess its effectiveness? Are these efforts truly reaching the people, or do they remain within the government and policy circles?
Thank you, Amirul. Thank you, Farhan, for having me on the show. Yes, that is a very good question to, to start with. And as we know, ASEAN, whenever in a calendar year in ASEAN, there are usually over 200 meetings. Yeah, in some years it could be up to 300 meetings of senior officials on the governmental level, in the different tracks or different pillars of ASEAN. So yes, it does look like it is very government heavy. Of course, ASEAN tries to engage with the public through various channels. As we know, there are social media posts of the summits and of the meetings, public forums, and sometimes youth programs held in conjunction with some of these meetings. And we've also taken note in some years, some host countries usually in its effort to make ASEAN more inclusive, they collaborate with academic institutions, CSOs, civil society organizations, and also the private sector. Of course, while these efforts have made ASEAN more visible, the effectiveness, I would argue, varies across member states. Yeah, what you feel about ASEAN, the enthusiasm about ASEAN in Malaysia differs widely from, say, other parts of ASEAN, Laos, Cambodia, and all that. But public awareness and participation, I think, remain limited due to, like I mentioned just now, so many meetings, because due to the technical nature of ASEAN's work, and that perception that I think they have not been able to shake off, that it is a very government-driven entity. Of course, interestingly, we know ASEAN has over 670 million people. So it is the third largest market in the world by population after China and India. Yet, many of ASEAN's own citizens are not aware of a direct impact of ASEAN on their lives, from, say, visa-free travel among member states to technical things like trade agreements that keeps goods affordable. So I think major problem here is also how ASEAN communicates some of its successes so that it is felt by the people, to make it more people-centric. And that is why in Malaysia's chairmanship this year, the theme is inclusivity and sustainability. So inclusivity is very important, because what is the point of doing all this if no one cares? ASEAN people, ASEAN citizens themselves do not feel and do not care about ASEAN.
Yeah, like you mentioned, with visa-free entry for ASEAN citizens in most member states and growing regional tourism, of course, I think it is easier than ever to explore these neighboring countries. But the question here is, do we feel a real sense of home when we visit another ASEAN country? Are we embracing each other's cultures the way Europeans do within the EU? Or do language barriers, unfamiliar systems, and cultural differences still make us feel like outsiders? So, how can ASEAN improve mobility and cultural integration so that its people feel more connected?
Yeah, so I'm a believer in the whole ASEAN market, and having covered ASEAN as a consultant that work across the region. I feel there is not enough done at and I would personally, I would like to see at the education level that we start in schools about teaching a very updated version of ASEAN history, and instilling that sense of importance of ASEAN, and knowing each other's own. I think each other nations' histories better. I think you rightly say. So do we feel ASEAN when we travel in the different capital? Even the fact that sometimes in some countries there is a special ASEAN lane immigration, and some countries, other countries don't have it. It's not something that is uniform. This is something that needs serious working on. Something that I think ASEAN policymakers should look at cultivating a sense of ASEAN from early on in the game. So that is why I am a proponent that better historical context should be made at the education level. It's with syllabus in schools, to cultural exchanges between ASEAN nations should be encouraged. And third, in terms of not just looking at that schooling level, university, youth level, right? But even when you are already working, um, there needs to be greater mobility among ASEAN talents, so that you foster this sense of one community that ASEAN envisions. So sometimes when you go abroad, it's always like the case with Malaysia. You feel more Malaysian when you're abroad. So when you are like, for instance, myself, when I'm participating in conferences outside this region. So, for instance, if you're in the World Economic Forum, or you're in a Milken conference in the US, you tend to look out for other ASEAN participants, and then you band together and like, hey, we're from the same part of the world. Let's go grab like Thai food, for example. So these are the things I think at the micro level, there is that sense of connection and familiarity, but this has not been harnessed enough to create that sense of identity and commonness amongst ASEAN member countries.
Mr. Amir, like you mentioned before, for decades ASEAN has been primarily seen as a platform for government-to-government diplomacy. Why do you think it is important for ASEAN to transition itself towards a more people-centric approach? And what are the risks if this shift is not happening?
Okay, so we've always said that ASEAN as a bloc, it's the largest economic bloc in the world, actually, and the potential is huge. By 2030, we could be the fourth largest economy. So in order to achieve this, you need better integration. So if you don't do it now, and then it's only on paper you say that, hey, ASEAN has got 677 or so million people, but if it doesn't act as a better integrated market in against this backdrop of global geopolitical uncertainties and risk, then you're not a strong global player. So that therein lies the strategic importance of really investing in regional better economic regional integration, because why is economic regional integration is easier? Because everyone is after something to report back in their own countries, right? And economy is an easier common denominator to work on rather than security issues or social, political, even well, tourism. There's a spillover. There's ASEAN it's an economic spillover. So economic integration, I think, is a strategic imperative for ASEAN because it acts as a glue. And if you do not work on this easy common denominator together, then ASEAN risks falling apart and be pulled in different directions. As we know, the world now is a multipolar world where you have all the big superpowers trying to not to say tear us, but pull us in different directions and trying to get us to side with their side. So if ASEAN do not stand and stick together, it gets the risk of it being pulled apart is there. ASEAN breaks up. What is the point of selling the fact that we have the largest we have a big market, so on and so forth. So I think it's therefore that therein lies the importance for ASEAN to succeed.
Well, what do you think of the recent suggestions by an expert, if I'm not mistaken, who suggests, the idea of creating a standardized history book to be used across all ASEAN member states? And of course, the goal is to ensure that our understanding of regional history is uniform rather than shaped, solely by national narratives. So let's say, imagine if, students in Indonesia, Malaysia and Thailand all learn from the same historical perspective. Would this help foster a stronger ASEAN identity, or would it be a challenge given that each country has its own version of history?
Yes, of course. And we always say histories are written by winners, right? So there's always one version of history, there are many versions of history, you rightly pointed out. So, but I am a proponent of this. I support this idea. You need to start somewhere. It is difficult to form a collective history of a nation, a region, like ASEAN has 10 countries, member countries in it, with different languages, different historical context and cultural background. To get to write one narrative about ASEAN is not easy, but it is it's a project that is worth embarking on. You have to start somewhere. And given the ASEAN has existed for entering its sixth decade, right? It's gotten used to doing, as we say, so many meetings in a year. So what is one more track in writing history, writing collective history of ASEAN in terms of doing meetings, doing more meetings on it to work on something. And this is not something that can be finished. Don't expect it to be completed within a year or so. I'm sure everyone would want a certain version of the history, so reviews and all that will have to be done. So that's the main challenge is getting everyone to agree on these 10 nations to agree on one version of the history. But having said that, we have to start somewhere.
Well, I think there's more to it in terms of how we can bring ASEAN closer to its people, but we will be taking a short break and we'll be right back after this.
Hidupkan Ramadan dengan pengisian penuh bermakna.
Kasih sayang Allah mentakdirkan sesuatu dengan kuasanya.
Syukuri nikmat kurniaan yang Maha Esa.
Kami dah ajar Mak mengaji.
Berdoa pula dalam solat kita makbul, insya-Allah.
Terokai keindahan dan keunikan pelbagai budaya untuk dijadikan sebagai inspirasi.
Ada pengorbanan bang. Yang penting berkah.
Alhamdulillah. perkongsian tips masakan bersama selebriti terkenal.
Life is beautiful and you're beautiful too.
Drama yang penuh emosi untuk dijadikan iktibar.
Hani sudah, Hani kena minta maaf.
Baik buruk you sekarang, I terima seadanya.
Cinta tu kan daripada hati.
Agama tu tiang hidup kita.
Ramadan ini indahnya lain macam bersama Astro.
Well, welcome back to ASEAN Kita with me, Amirul Aiman, and my co-host Farhan Hakimi, where in today's episode, we are talking about how to bring ASEAN closer to its people. And joining us online is Mr. Amir Farid Rahim, Director of Strategy for KRA Group. So, Mr. Amir, many ASEAN policies tend to follow a top-down approach, and is often driven by government decisions. So, what strategies can ASEAN adopt to ensure that policies are not just made at the top, but it also reflect the actual needs and aspirations of the people?
And that's a very, very good observation there, Amirul. Yeah, you're right. Because of so many government meetings, so everything becomes top-down, yeah? So one of the ways probably we could try to learn from the EU, for example, where there is a petition mechanism. This is a petition referendum, at least getting feedback from public on certain policies. And I think but there needs to be political will from the ASEAN the government leaders to allow this. As it is at the moment, okay, you have the government track, and then you have business trying to complement the government, but it's still very high level. So in order to make it, I think one of the strategies, if ASEAN is serious about getting public participation, is introducing things like petition and referendum for small issues. It doesn't have to be these contentious issues on, say, for example, Myanmar or the South China Sea. You try avoiding that and start petition on some cultural issues. But the risk of this is also, if, for instance, someone starts petitioning over the origin of nasi ayam, then probably that could lead into kind of like a bit of a bickering between the nations. But I think friendly banter among member states are okay. Then apart from that, in terms of making it more felt by the people, public consultations must be done systematically across all the pillars. It cannot be done just to tick the box in terms of inclusivity, but it must not be an afterthought. It must be part of that process of ASEAN. So this requires discipline, commitment, and political will from the leaders. And one more thing that I've always wanted to see is for ASEAN to be part of the popular culture in each creative industry of each countries in ASEAN. So, for example, like you watch Korean drama, like promotes destinations, like, you know, there's some Korean dramas that say, oh yeah, let's go to Kota Kinabalu, let's go to Bali. And of course, whoever Bali, then they'll be shooting there and all that. These kind of things need to be more encouraged in a seamless way. For example, you know, why you shoot drama, we always like, or if it's a high budget drama, go to for Malay drama, for example, in Malaysia, they go to London or go to New Zealand, go to Istanbul. Why don't you do one in Bangkok, Jakarta, Cambodia, things like that, right? But make it seamless as part of, I'm just going to visit my cousin who lives in Bangkok, for example, and then have that cross-cultural reference in popular culture to socialize the idea and the concept of ASEAN. But this but this is something that just needs to be encouraged by the government. The government must not do it proactively, because when government does it, it becomes like a very public campaign, and that is it can be a big turnoff for the rest of for the mass market. But this is a challenge that I would love to see the creative industry people embark on and take on, because creative people of course art represents society, represents culture. It's the best way to get things like this going.
Well, I think it's intriguing that you spoke about creative industry. In Europe, apart from the EU making it easier for people to move around, they also have, cultural performs like Eurovision. And it's not just a song competition, but it's a huge event that brings Europeans together, creating a sense of regional connectivity. So, that makes me wonder, what about ASEAN? Can we actually have something like that? I mean, maybe a music competition or a cultural festival that brings together artists from, across the region, something that really connects the people beyond just policies and diplomacy. Would that work for ASEAN? What do you think?
I totally pro this idea, but we've seen some of it in the 1990s, in the 1980s and 1990s. There was experiments of this, but it usually gravitates around the Nusantara, the Malay-speaking part of ASEAN, Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, and Singapore. We usually, Singapore is included in this discussion. I don't know whether you remember, there was. You guys are too young to remember this, but there was Asia Bagus, for example. It's not ASEAN, but it's Asia Bagus. Winners were like Amy Mastura and all that. This is like early 90s. So participants used to be from Singapore, Malaysia, a few other countries across ASEAN competing, and then the big finale is in another Asia country. And the Eurovision idea also is not something strange for a Malaysian audience. For example, like song contests is a big thing in the country. The recent, the annual Anugerah Juara Lagu. Sorry, it's not your TV station, but something like that. It's easy for people to understand, right? So I think using art, whether it's music, whether it's TV, broadcast, I think should be encouraged more. But it must not be seen to be government pushed. But having said that, if there's no government pushing it, then there's no funding for it. So it's also a commercial. It's a commercial venture, but the commercial argument can be made because the market is huge. For instance, if you have like a version of like American Idol, you can have an ASEAN Idol. I think it could do very well to capture the imagination of the ASEAN masses.
Yeah, you said rightly so that it's not really just a government approach, so meaning that private sectors also plays an important role in ASEAN's mission to bring it is closer to people. So how can economic initiatives perhaps could be structured so that they don't just benefit the government sectors, but also businesses and private sectors as well?
So I think one other thing that if we blame the government, not blame, but we say that the government for ASEAN has so many kind of meetings and all that, when the businesses participate in or take on an ASEAN hat, they like to do conferences. So the conference. But these are, again, very high level things. So you see, but it is also a function of momentum, yeah. About 10, 15 years ago, there was a lot of drive about creating companies with great ASEAN footprint. So Malaysia, we embarked on that. So we, for example, look at AirAsia, look at the banks, CIMB, Maybank, and all that. They aggressively expanded their footprint across ASEAN. This was a collective effort driven by the government to encourage this. And I think there needs to be the same level of commitment by government to encourage businesses to expand their footprint across ASEAN. Businesses can have their own ASEAN identity. They do not have to wait for the government to give a top-down narrative on how the ASEAN identity should be. So I think some of the companies, they do it better. You look at airlines, for example, look at the cabin crew if you're in these airlines, and they are from different countries of ASEAN, and you see the flags on their name tag and what languages they speak. And I think that is something that is admirable and should be replicated across other sectors. But the main issue here is then talent mobility. So talent mobility there needs to be constant up in order to ensure that talent mobility gets easier and it chives with the requirements of the labor market at the particular time. So like now, with people working online more than working physically, things like that, more flexible working hours, incorporating gig economy structure and all that supports, but still supporting an ASEAN identity.
And also, Mr. Ahmed, if you look at it, young people today are more connected than ever, thanks to the social media and also digital platforms. Well, take esports, for example, games like Mobile Legends and PUBG, which have massive followings across the region. And we often see players from different ASEAN countries competing together in international tournaments. But does that translate into a stronger ASEAN identity, or is it just about the game? So how can we leverage gaming and digital spaces to foster a deeper sense of belonging among ASEAN youth?
No, I think technology is an important a driver in building that identity. And I think the youth, the younger generation, they're all digital natives. We are all digital natives these days. So I think one is participating on all these gaming that encourages ASEAN is one thing. Another is the recognition that that comes with it. There is no one recognizes this effort of the young ones to band together, compete in an ASEAN kind of like gaming competition, or them banding together, grouping together and doing it. There's no recognition for it because we are still stuck in the whole like, oh, it's got to be SEA Games, it's got to be these kind of like mainstream sports and all that. But I think if you want to see the success of creating that organic feel of an ASEAN identity, then at all levels, I think it should be encouraged, whether it is digital or physical. But there needs to be recognition. If there is no recognition, then what's the point of them doing it if all we care about is how many gold, silver, and bronze you get at the SEA Games?
Well, thank you, Mr. Amir Farid Rahim, for sharing your thoughts in bringing ASEAN closer to its people. So I guess that is all for ASEAN Kita, where we have our guest, Mr. Amir Farid Rahim, Director of Strategy from KRA Group, that shares us some thoughts on how to shift ASEAN from just government to government initiative and policies to bring it closer to its people. I guess that's all from ASEAN Kita for today. I'm Amrul Aiman.
And I am Farhan Hakimi. See you next time.